Tansei Tanishi Buju. It's Samantha Loney, journalist with Simcoe Community Media here. I am here to bring you the panelist talk that we had on the recent Barrie state of emergency. The City of Barrie announced a state of emergency due to the housing and encampment crisis. The mayor had declared that there were 19 encampments active in the City of Barrie. And today we wanted to bring you some panelists who are experts and bring lived experience in working with the unhoused. All right, so thank everyone for tuning in. We're here for a panel discussion on the recent state of emergency that was called for the City of Barrie. We're going to start off by our lovely panelists introducing themselves. So do we want to start on this slide?
Sure. My name is Chown. I'm a doctor. I work in Aurelia doing anesthesia, and I work in Barrie doing primary care. I work at a clinic called Compassionate Care Without Barriers, and we provide care for unhoused people, low-income people, and people without OHIP coverage.
Okay, hi. I'm Schneider. I'm 47 years old. I live in Barrie. I was a member of the homeless community for 2.5 years. With my husband Ron. I have been in I've been in recovery for the last 7 months, and I'm just here to offer any ideas that I can.
I'm Pineau. I'm a volunteer with Ryan's Hope, and I'm here to share my lived experience and what I've learned over the last 4 years being on the front lines in our community here in Barrie.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is Tilley. I use they, them pronouns. She, her is cool too. First and foremost, I am a community member here in Barrie. I have connection to Barrie Housing and Homelessness Justice Network. I'm a supporter and member of that organization. I also work with folks who are experiencing homelessness as well as those who use drugs in the area. My background is in social work, and I have experience as a drug user. I'm currently sober. I also have experience as a mental health facilities survivor.
I'm Reverend Naylor, and I use she, her pronouns. I am the co-founder and director of Ryan's Hope. Ryan's Hope is an organization that my husband and I started in memory of our son Ryan. Ryan lived with bipolar disorder, and he self-medicated with street drugs because the pharmaceutical medications didn't work for him, and we lost him to toxic drug poisoning in 2020. So we had an 8-year journey with Ryan in this community, trying to get him supports to help him with his mental health, with his substance use issues, and we came face to face with system failure after system failure. And I've been on the front lines of this crisis for the last 4.5 years, doing boots on the ground, encampment support, street outreach, and we just keep seeing the same failures that we were facing with Ryan. So like what I always say is we have a lot of supports on paper, but when people go to access them, they're not available.
My name is Speers. I'm a husband and father. I care about the community and all the people who live in it. That's why I'm here today. I'm an activist on a whole bunch of fronts, including as a member of the Barrie Housing and Homelessness Justice Network.
Perfect. And yeah, of course we're here to talk about the state of emergency that was called by Mayor Alex Nuttall. And you've all sort of given your intro of how you belong to sort of maybe working within the unhoused community or have experience with this housing crisis that we're currently facing. So maybe if each of you want to sort of give your reaction to this state of emergency that was called by the mayor. And anybody can go if anybody. I'll be here to moderate.
Oh gosh.
I guess I'll start. I have my little point here that I believe the mayor is using this as a way to get more money and control over the public. He had multiple choices that he could have made with council to help this crisis instead of using it for his own vendetta against the homeless community. So knowing that we don't have enough beds or anywhere near enough affordable housing, there's tons of buildings. So affordable housing is the issue here. The smart and humane thing to do is to connect with encampments, offer porta potties, garbage pickup, create and allow the space for people to connect with each other with supports like the tiny home communities have created. They've created a space to help each other. The mayor has had multiple chances to hear how we can help, and he refuses. Instead, he chooses to further traumatize and chooses to make this crisis worse.
Okay, I think my initial reaction was, at first I was like, are you kidding me? He has a heart? Like, what? We're gonna do something? And then I'm like, yeah, no, it can't be happening like that. So of course I was right, and I was just hoping for the best, like I always do. I definitely agree with the money. It's about money for him and what he needs, and maybe votes, I guess. I don't really know what he's trying to gain out of this other than nothing for the homeless community, period. I don't see anything different other than re-traumatizing, as Ashley said, just constantly everybody who is out there just feeling like, okay, I'm comfortable right now, I'm safe for now. And then just like that, everything you have, could you imagine really, you know, like just in your home and somebody comes in and says, well, we really don't like the way your house looks on the outside, so let's go put it all in the dumpster. It's just, it's sickening, actually.
Way to put it.
Yeah, anyone?
I'll just add that I wasn't surprised when I saw the mayor bring this forward, and because it kind of fits his idea about how to kind of get rid of people and sweep problems under the rug as best as he wants to do, and like when you vow to end encampments without actually promising to do anything to end the conditions that create them, it just kind of shows you exactly where they're coming from. It shows a lack of intelligence. It shows a lack of inspiration and vision, and that's pretty much what what Mayor Nuttall has shown over the past 3 years. It's cruel. It caters to his base. It caters to what I like to call the two-car garage crowd. The people living in Barrie who complain they don't come downtown anymore because they think it's unsafe, when we all know it actually isn't. And yeah, it's basically him furthering his far right agenda at the expense of people who call this community home, just like we all do. It's taking sides. It's creating us versus them mentality, and we know that we've been in an emergency for a long time, right? So declaring it now, without actually having a plan to do anything about it except sweep these encampments and move people around and upset their lives and destroy lives in a lot of cases, it's right up his alley, and we need to really. I thought it was telling that, in his letters to the Premier and to the Prime Minister, he talks about enforcement, he talks about, trying to influence the courts in how they decide these charter cases. But there was nothing about housing. There was no ask for increased public housing. There was no talk about, ending the developers' hold on housing in our province. And taking profit out of it, which is what leads to the situation we're in. So, so you could say it was a lot of nothing. It was a lot of kind of strongman tactics. But at the end of the day, people are going to suffer, and our community is not going to be any better for it.
Yeah,
So when I heard, I had the reaction of anger and then fear for my friends. I wasn't surprised because, like Michael said, this is kind of in the mayor's, playbook of what he wanted to do. And I feel like he took a tragedy for this community, which was the murder of two vulnerable members of our community, and he used that against this whole community that was in mourning, and use it to criminalize them and to villainize them. And my fear for them was that how is this going to impact them? Because you can't just say, we're going to clear Barrie of every last tent when you haven't provided any housing? Where do you expect them to go? Just further into hiding, which disconnects them from their supports, disconnects them from their community, and puts them more at risk of death, of violence, and it's an ignorant move. Like, you can tell he hasn't spoken with people actually living in the encampments. He knows nothing of the reality of people that are living in these conditions. He hasn't spoken to any frontline workers to understand the situation. And it's just going to cost the taxpayers of Barrie a lot more money. Housing solves homelessness. That's it. Without housing, we're always going to have a homeless population. You can't just tell them to leave and send them to other communities. And his thing about saying that half of the homeless population in Barrie is not even Barrie residents, he's saying that anyone that hasn't been here for 3 years doesn't classify as a resident. I think that a lot of people, housed or unhoused, would be upset with that comment. I know there's other questions, so I'm going to pass it on to someone else.
Yeah, I think the first thing I thought was, what is the benefit of this? I know in one of his original speeches, he was talking about, or there was a discussion about asking the province for more funding. And I think that we can all agree that is needed. We need more funding for supportive services. We need more funding for housing instead of emergency shelter beds, for example. And that's not to say that emergency shelter beds should not also be funded. But we need longer term solutions. The more that I kind of have been listening to what's going on, and the more I've been kind of paying attention, it seems that this might be part of a bigger ask. There's a lot of conversation about the need for bail reform. There's a lot of conversation about the need for forced treatment. And I'm concerned that, to Christine's point, that there's going to be a weaponizing of the tragedy that happened to people who are living in encampments, that their tragic deaths will be used to try and justify further harm to the folks that they were living with, that they were surviving with, that they were making community with, in the guise of safety. And I'm really considering or reflecting on, what does safety look like versus what does comfort look like, and who is being prioritized in that conversation. I think oftentimes when we discuss safety, or when safety is discussed, it's often what we're actually talking about is comfort. People's comfort with seeing poverty, people's comfort with maybe folks that they're not used to, folks that don't look or sound or do the same things, make the same choices as them, and a discomfort with how to engage and create community in meaningful ways. And I think what we really need to talk about is safety. Whose lives are at stake? Whose health is at stake? Who we're prioritizing? And I hope that this will bring about deeper conversations in that direction. I really hope that we don't lose sight of the fact that 2 people were tragically killed because their safety was not prioritized.
I'll just quickly add to what everyone said, but I think there's something really perverted about creating a situation where people are forced into a really unsafe living situation and continuously attacking those people, and then when a tragedy happens out of that sort of out of those conditions, then we use that to attack them further, right? Like a year before the Mulcaster eviction was the Bursey eviction, like a year to the day was the Bursey eviction, right? And so that was that was last year we were doing this, where just leading up to the winter, all the encampments are getting taken down, everyone's getting cleared out of their encampments, and the only one that wasn't getting taken down was the one on Ann Street. And so of course everyone goes there, it's spilling out onto the street, and then of course those people are humans, so they go to the bathroom. Those people are humans, so they get in arguments, and then there's also of course crime that comes as well, right? And so it's like you've created this real area where everything is just turned up to the max, and then now that someone comes in and something bad happens, we then just target that community even more. So there's just something really sick about that to me.
Like
I mean, you can't. Go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to add, it's strategic.
Yeah, yeah, and like you can't complain. Alex Nuttall shouldn't have a right to complain about open drug use when he's fought against supervised consumption sites for so long, right? He shouldn't be allowed to talk about health and safety when he's creating a situation where people have to be unsafe, right? And people's health is adversely affected. So it's there's something really nasty about what he's doing.
Yeah, well, to jump off what you were saying, so part of his speech, and a couple of you have touched on it, was there was a lot of, and some people who were there to hear, and after it was, aired on TV, people have been complaining that he did equate homelessness to lawlessness, and that was one of his main, well, we believe, based on his speech that he gave, one of his main reasons was this murder that had happened, right? So how do you think that speech is kind of including in him saying like there's a lot of crime happening because of these encampments? How do you think that's going to have an effect on the unhoused community? And if any of you have,
Well, I can just say it's dehumanizing, right? That's the whole point, is to make them less than human, make people forget that it's people's, mom, dad, son, daughter, brother, sister that's out there, and turn them into aliens, right? That's the same thing with the citizenship language, right? They're not citizens of Barrie, right? He's trying to pull in a bit of this sort of xenophobia, racism into the whole thing as well, as much as he can, right? And give you as many reasons as possible to hate them. And so I think saying that they're all criminals anyways is like part of that same agenda.
It's very, very harmful. It's like creating that us versus them, right? And it's also, it's stigmatizing, it's misinformation that he's spreading, and he knows it's misinformation. Study after study has proven that people that are unsheltered and that are homeless are more likely to be victims of crime than are to actually be the ones to actually be perpetrators of the crime. And usually if there is crime committed by people that are homeless, like there is in any community, a lot of it has to do with they're living for survival. They're fighting for survival. So it's like theft and stuff like that. Things that they need to survive, they're just trying to get them in however way they can. But the reality is that more people that are homeless are victim of crimes than actually are perpetrators of crime. And our mayor knows this, so he's using misinformation to pit residents of Barrie against each other and create this divide between us, which is very, very dangerous, and it's very, very harmful. And a leader should be bringing a community together, not trying to divide them.
No, exactly. He's saying all of this while at the exact same time creating the exact environment for all of anything to happen. He's literally orchestrating it. When you move people around a lot, it creates that instability. With instability, you don't get to build a community, and you get forced into survival mode, and you get trapped there. So how can you expect someone to do what they need to do when the rug is constantly ripped out from under them?
Yeah, when I first, when I heard him making these comments, blaming the crime, the so-called crime at these encampments, I found it like quite disgusting language. But it's been language that's been used for decades by right-wing politicians to push their agenda. It's right out of the right-wing right-wing playbook. And so, the mayor likes to talk about being, about getting tough on crime. He's a law and order kind of guy. But I always find it funny that these law and order guys, they only look at certain aspects of the law. As soon as the law goes against them, they decide to ignore it, right? So all these court cases that have said that evicting encampments when there's not accessible and adequate services goes against people's charter rights. So the mayor chooses to ignore that part of the law. And of course now he's started to bring together some type of a coalition of the willing to fight to try to put in use the notwithstanding clause for to get around this. But the mayor is kind of a police-centered approach to community safety, where all the evidence shows that that's not how you make communities safer. But it's frustrating, and I'll bring it up just today as we're recording this. There was news about how the Barrie Police want an 11% increase to their budget next year, which will put it above the $80 million a year threshold, which is completely outrageous. And of course, the mayor sits on the police services board, so he's kind of involved in crafting this type of budget. And the chief in his comments today was saying part of the reason why they need all this money is because there's more policing has changed in our community, and he's pointed to homelessness and the mental health crisis and things like that. So what the mayor's doing now with these sweeps and this crackdown on homeless people, it costs it leads to extra policing costs when they should be going down. But that's kind of what who he is. It's kind of who he represents. He thinks policing is the way to go, when we all know that that's all that does is create a community that's not safe. It may make it safer, quote, safer for some people, but the people who probably need the safety the most are the ones that start to live in a community that's less safe for them.
I just want to add a quick, as far as people in the homeless community getting victimized over and over again, I can tell you that 100% that is definitely true. My husband was a victim of murder on Family Day, downtown Barrie, on church steps. And just just throwing it in there that how we are perceived differently. So the man that took his life was given 7 years, and this person had an extremely violent record, but it just shows you how we are less than, when he was still a father and a husband and a grandfather and a son and very important, and took care of people in the homeless community as well, So I feel that really deeply that, our entire system is broken, to be quite honest, and if there had been more help, more support, especially for couples out there, because there's really no couple support out there at all. I believe too, with everything in me, that my husband would still be alive today if there had been more supports for us to have been housed, even in a room, anything, but we couldn't get anything. So as far as that goes, removing them from each encampment is literally, and I mean, we've built communities ourselves in our homeless community. We've built our own kind of support, when we can't get it from the government or the town or whatever it is. The people in the encampment say they rely on each other, and no, they're not. I'm going to tell you, the 2.5 years my husband and I spent on the street was literally the greatest years of our existence in 30 years, because of the amount that people cared out there that were in the same position, and no judgment caught, but we were all alone, yet we weren't, it was so, I'd definitely like to see a change. No doubt about that.
Yeah. Yes, Sarah, did you have any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think two things. To go off of the conversation about the criminalization, I think that unfortunately this is going to continue to deepen the sentiment that people who are experiencing homelessness are not, they're not the same. They're not worthy of protection. They're not worthy of safety. I mean, we've seen that in Barrie with the lack of support and how that led to the murder that Lori's speaking to and the murders off of the Ann Street encampment. But we have seen it in Canada before. We've seen it with the Robert Pickton murders, where women who were using drugs and experiencing homelessness in the downtown east side were easy targets for serial predators who murdered over 30 women. It's estimated. We saw it with MacArthur in Toronto more recently, where people who were using drugs and people who were experiencing homelessness were again targeted. And when people in those communities and the people that loved people in those communities brought that information forward, it was easily shrugged off. There was not a belief, because of the transient nature of survival homelessness, that these people were actually gone. And I think that really, this move has the potential, and even just the conversations we're having right now in public spaces about homelessness is really going to continue to further that. And so that scares me. And then also the other thing that we kind of touched on as well is my understanding, while there's no actual funding that immediately comes with declaring a state of emergency, there are powers that can come with declaring a state of emergency, including powers to engage in policy, decision making, that sort of thing, that normally would need to go through multiple channels to be supported. And so one of the things that I'm concerned about is that we may see policy changes that are not going through the democratic process to be put through. So for example, we've already seen in 2023, there was a motion without notice that was essentially targeting people who were trying to support people in community by targeting both people who were panhandling and people who were providing money or resources to people who are panhandling. We also saw that around people who were just on the streets and giving them clothing or food or blankets, that sort of thing. We saw a targeted attempt to remove communities' ability to care for each other. And I'm not sure how much folks know, the motion without notice was approved to rewrite the current bylaw. And then it stopped there. So there was an approval to change the current bylaw, and we just haven't, the City of Barrie hasn't actually moved forward with that yet. My concern though is that this may actually provide the legal backing to be able to push things like that through. And not just on a local scale with municipalities, but we're seeing this, we're bringing up conversations about bail reform, when the reality is we're not putting resources into the system that people need to be able to maintain stability for survival-based crimes. And so what's happening, so many people are flooding into the criminal legal system that the folks who maybe need support, maybe need to be in jail, are not, their cases are not being heard. People are in jail for up to 3 years before their cases are being heard. And so that is overburdening the criminal legal system. For example, Central North Correctional Center in Penetang, so our provincial prison here, which is where everybody goes if they've not been sentenced or not been convicted yet. It's the classrooms where people are there to get rehabilitated and support are full of people because we don't have room. The prison has, I think it's like 30% over capacity right now. And we're seeing that everywhere. So this push, using these small examples to push things like bail reforms to not actually support people who are going through that system, but instead to just make more prisons to keep people in jail longer, which we know does not actually reduce the rate of crime, I think it's going to have a much bigger impact far beyond Barrie.
Yeah, and we talked about, well, you just, talked about sort of the, criminal justice system being, and we know that's been talked about earlier too, but so what I wanted to know is, because we were seeing these like encampments close, and to sort of mention the crime of now we're gonna see these bylaw officers going out to these people who are living on the street and, you know, giving them their fine, things like that, which is probably also, you know, not gonna help our system. Ash, you were talking about earlier how these like sweeps of these encampments don't really help the housing crisis. Maybe you guys want to talk about sort of the impacts that you're going to see, because we do have, according to the mayor, you know, 19 more encampments that are active around the city. What do you think is going to happen with these like sweeps of encampments? Because obviously Mulcaster was only the first of one. We're pretty sure that the mayor wants to see all these encampments gone. And you were talking a bit about how, you know, that's going to create more harm. A couple of you over here, so if you want to.
Yeah, no, like I'll start with this. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, expecting a different result. We've been doing sweeps as a means of a way to deal with this crisis forever, for as long as I can remember. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So at the end of the day, like, where exactly do you expect people to go when there's nowhere to go? So you say the encampments are the problem, the tents are the problem, so we need to get rid of the tents. So you're going after the tents. You're not worried about the people, you're worried about the spectacle. That's all the sweeps are. It's a spectacle, and it's to appease a handful of people, all at the same time as being used as a means for people like the mayor to try and get more money and control over people because they can never have enough. The sweeps literally are just pushing people all around town. And now with this, our latest, not even just all around Barrie, but actually pushing people out to other towns who, again, still don't have the support or the means to be able to support people the way they need to be supported. So you're pushing people not only all around towns, but trying to push them outside of towns, away from what little bit of support they may have been able to find. And then you're blaming people for not taking these supports or refusing supports when the support you're offering is not any support in any way, shape, or form. Like, we need actual supports. We need more supports, not less. We need safe consumption sites. We need abstinence-based. We need no barrier supports. We need low barrier supports. We need to be meeting people where they're at and have different levels of supports for along the way. One size does not fit all. Forced treatment does not work. That's another thing. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. If you look back, forced treatment does not work. That's just simple. It's as simple as that. It doesn't work. We're dealing with trauma and different factors that differentiate from person to person. If we want that person to be able to do better and be better and want better for themselves, then we need to see that individual and meet them where they're at and help them learn what they need to learn at that stage. We need to be able to see people, and sweep people under the rug, quite literally, right? So if we're wanting to help people and help people do better and be better, then we need to see that individual and meet them where they're at, help them learn what they need to learn at that stage, then adapt with them through different levels of supports, different levels, as they learn how to love and take care of themselves. You know, that's another big thing about all of this on the side of supports, is that what we do have available doesn't last, and it's not enough. So people love to throw around, people are refusing supports, you know, so we gotta force people, we gotta just sweep them away and everything. But when you actually look at the supports that are available, they don't last. I can speak to this as an experience for myself. So, as simple as this. I work up the energy and the courage, and I push myself to reach out. The first step in all of that is doing the research and finding where to go. Then I have to force myself to make the call, and I'm kind of talking past and present at the same time while getting this story out. Having to force myself to make the call or the email. Then there's a waiting period. A lot can happen in that waiting period. This one time I was able to get through the waiting period. I got connected, did the intake, was able to get through that and continue to go. So I got into the therapy. Did my therapy, I showed up, I made connections, I started feeling better. Program ends. No follow-up, no options to continue, just abruptly stops and back to being on your own. And that's the best case. that I've heard and experienced. I've also had the experience of someone literally just reading me the same damn script every call instead of actually being human and caring. I was crying on the phone with this therapist, saying that this isn't helping. And she took that as me ending our sessions and offered nothing but had me repeat the same process that I did to get her. Needless to say, I gave up on that one. The one that was working beautifully, I still think about and wish so bad they offered another level to continue with. The abrupt stop has and still continues to mess with me. That therapy, that program, helped so much until it became a part of my pain. Now it's like I'm grieving the help I was getting. And that's the biggest thing. There's more supports are needed. More funding is needed in the right places. You know, people have anger and pain with this situation, and I can empathize with that. But I ask you to turn that anger and pain towards the right people. You know, the right people. There is the right people to blame, and it's not the ones that are the victims that are just trying to survive through the day. There is people to blame. I promise you. You can put that anger and pain to good use. Like pushing for more supports. We need the more supports. And sweeps, they need to be absolute. Pushing people all over the place into other towns, as I was saying, and pushing them under the rug, it's not helping anything. It's not solving a damn thing. It is, as we've talked about already over here, creating hate and divide. And most importantly, it's traumatizing. Like, I don't think any of us can stress that enough. Sweeps are traumatizing. That's all they are. And they're expensive, actually. I'll throw that one out there too. Very expensive. So putting that funding into supports instead of sweeps would be the world of a difference that literally we all want to see. Everyone wants to see. Anyone else want to jump in there?
I'm just going to say something small, like just a little bit. So I mean, as far as, you know, they need to come and people want to be clean and they want to be sober, but they want to be housed most of all before they can even do that. Because I'm telling you right now, there's no way on earth are you going to want to be sober. Are you going to want to put that effort into knowing, I'm just going to go back to my tent here and I'm going to go, you know, to the bathroom over here in the woods, and I'm going to have no sense of self-love at all, because how can I have that? So firstly, like the amount of money they put into the sweep, put it into some kind of transitional housing that helps the people maybe get housing first, get comfortable, get situated, feel good about themselves, have a shower, you know, and then and introduce, like maybe in a month from now, a little bit of you know, a little bit of here, we can maybe let's talk about doing this can help, you know, just put everything in one area. And I don't mean it to segregate, I don't mean that, but you need to start somewhere, and it needs to be that people need to be in a safe 4 walls and a roof where they can start to heal and start to move forward. And I mean, thank God I have family, because I'm telling you right now, if I didn't have a support system, I would never, there'd be no point. I would just want to probably die I wouldn't want to even try. So I just think it's fair that most of these people out here that I've met are so smart and loving and caring, and they have a lot to offer. If they just had the basic needs, the basic necessities that everybody in this world deserves and has a right to. You're not born into this world thinking, I'm going to be, this is what my life is. No, it's not. So I just like, get us housed, get them housed, and start from there, and have a heart, for sure. Definitely have a heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd like to. Can't expect people to stand on their feet when there's no ground to stand on.
That's right, yeah.
So just following up with that, like to appeal to people that maybe don't really care about, you know, what happens to people when there's you know, an encampment eviction and they get pushed aside and swept to another community, and then they just return here, or they just are shuffled throughout the city of Barrie from one neighborhood to another neighborhood until the people in that neighborhood complain. You maybe don't care about what's happening to them because there is like, you know, this stigma that, you know, they made bad choices that landed them there, which we know is not true. It's system failures that have been the reason that most people are unhoused in our community. It's expensive and it's a waste of our tax dollars. Our mayor and our council are just doubling down on the criminalization of people that are unsheltered when it's not their fault. There's a lack of housing in our community and across the whole country. And if we would be investing more in providing housing, which is the first thing, housing first programs work, that's been proven across the world that they're successful. People cannot start to work on their mental health or their addiction or any of those other, trauma, any issues that they're dealing with when they don't know where they're going to sleep tonight. They don't know if they're going to wake up alive, because it's dangerous out there on the streets, right? And so if they were to invest those dollars, like even 11% of the police budget, in actually housing people, that would be a better use of our tax dollars, right? And I think we should all care about how our tax dollars are just being thrown away and wasted on just shuffling people all around the city, and further traumatizing people instead of investing in housing. It's actually cost less to house people than to keep them homeless. So to provide housing, like a supportive housing, costs for one person approximately between $3,500 to $4,000 a month. A shelter bed is about $8,000, $8,000 a month. A hospital bed is like, way more than that. I don't have the number. 30, yeah. And yeah.
$1,000 a day, I think, is
so $30,000 a month. And I think that if a jail, if they were incarcerated, it would be $10,000 a month. So the best investment of our tax dollars is to house people. But we are just continuing to have a reactive approach to homelessness and say they're all on the street because they're lawless and they're criminals, and we're not going to house them, but we're going to force them into treatment. We're going to force them, into incarceration. When the jails are full, there is no treatment for people that want it. There's a wait list of 6 months for people. People are dying on wait lists to get treatment. So how can we even be having conversations about forcing people into treatment when people can't even get the treatment when they want it, right? And we know it doesn't work.
No, it's like just wanted to add on talking about, using the funding tax dollars for actually solving the crisis. Not only is it being used for things like sweeps, but it's being used to quite literally orchestrate this hate and divide within our community. Like our money is literally being used against us to separate us from each other. Like that's another really big point that a lot of people don't realize with all of these things and interviews and strategic language and sweeps and everything. It's this narrative that is being pushed and orchestrated in front of everybody to make us hate each other and be fighting each other. It's that red versus black ants mentality. Meanwhile, there's a third person coming around shaking that jar, like people like Alex are shaking the jar and coming on and saying things to try and blame your problems on this person who's a victim. You have all these problems because this person's sleeping in a tent. Like a lot of the money is being put into this narrative and pushing this down everybody's throats, and get angry, but get angry at the right people.
Yeah.
I would just add that I think we need to look at the issue through kind of a harm reduction lens. So, until the real housing exists, we need to make sure that encampments, instead of sweeping them and kicking people out, we need to make sure that they are serviced with proper sanitation, with harm prevention, with overdose prevention. With heat, with water, garbage disposal, because people are going to choose to live in these encampments because there's nowhere else to go for a lot of them, because the shelter system maybe doesn't suit their needs. They don't have housing, so I think just like we need a supervised consumption site to keep people alive, so they can if they want to make the decision to maybe go into treatment. We need to look at these encampments, I think, the same way, so that we keep people safe, we keep people we keep people alive, while we, as Christina said, while we create more housing, I think specifically non-market housing is the way to go forward. So I think we need to, we need to focus on that. And then kind of, building off that, we also need to raise the rates for Ontario Works and disability. Like what the province gives people who for a lot of, no fault of their own, who can't find a job, who are disabled and can't work. It's kept, they're below the poverty line, and that's on purpose. And so when you have housing in Barrie, that's like $1,800, $2,000 a month for just a basic unit. The rates that the rates that we give for ODSP and Ontario Works is just way below that, and so people can't afford to live. So they find themselves on the street living rough. So I think we also need to look at we need to look at that, and we also need to bring in real rent control. The fact that developers can, if the units were created after 2018, I guess, that the rates can be set at whatever they want to be. That's going to keep people out, away from getting into the housing market. So these are all things I think that all kind of work together, and also need to be addressed.
I just want to follow up with what Michael was saying, so about the supporting the encampments, because there is no housing. Nobody wants to live in an encampment, and none of us that are, working with people that are unhoused want them to be living in encampments. We're not saying it's the solution. We've always been saying housing is the solution, but until there is enough housing for everybody, encampments are the safest way for people to build community and shelter for themselves. And advocates have been advocating, well, as long as I've been doing this, for supports to encampments. Again, another thing with Alex, or Mayor Nuttall, using a crisis that happened in a tragedy in the encampment to blame people for his lack of actually doing his job, because we as advocates have asked for porta potties to encampments, for garbage pickup to encampments, for needle disposals to encampments. We have asked for them to be provided with the same basic supports that any other residents in Barrie, are provided with, and it has just fallen on deaf ears over and over and over again. So the mayor and council has some responsibility in the condition that the encampment was found in, because they chose to ignore requests. They chose to provide basic supports, which it's a reactive thing. So now there's this huge cost that's going to be in the millions. We don't even know the total cost yet for environmental cleanup. But if they had have provided basic sanitation to the encampments to begin with, we would not be where we are now. And so I think that really needs to be talked about, because again, it's a waste of our tax dollars. And everyone, whether you care about the encampment residents or not, I think you care about your tax dollars, because we're all struggling right now. And so maybe we should be demanding more of our council, that they be investing our money in proactive solutions, root cause solutions, rather than just responding to the crisis when it gets to this state.
It just comes down to, we need to be treating this crisis with love and kindness if we want any hope of solving it.
Yeah. Any comments on this week's?
I have just agree with most of what's been said, and I think two things as I'm listening to folks talk are coming up. So the idea of choices. I want to say the folks who are working in shelter to do this work are working as hard as they possibly can and need more resources. I really want to make sure that we are, which I know everybody at this table acknowledges, we are not suggesting that the people who are doing this work shouldn't be doing this work or that other people could do it better. It's that we need more. We need other resources. We need emergency shelter so that if somebody is new to town and has no place to stay, they can find it. Or if they need that stepping stone into another place, they can find it. We have some transitional housing, but it's not enough. There's, I think, less than 200 units, and I want to say it's even less than that, although we're in the process of building more. It's still not going to meet the needs of folks who are experiencing homelessness. And then we need more permanent housing that is deeply affordable. So not based on the province's formula of what is affordable, but actually is based on how much people are making at minimum wage, how much people are bringing in on CPP or OW or ODSP. If we don't have housing options that are affordable within those specific criteria, we are going to continue to see people homeless, and we're going to continue to see homelessness increase. I know since COVID, as the economic crash continues to deepen, people who have never experienced homelessness in their lives, who maybe had property even, are experiencing homelessness at unregulated rates all throughout Canada. So I think it's really important that we recognize that we are much closer to being homeless. All of us are much closer to being homeless than we are to having, a yacht. And then I also really want to touch on the idea of drug law, lawlessness in general, and drug law specifically. I mean, we equate certain behaviors with, drug use, or that drug use is inherently bad or dangerous or a problem for society. But within the last 150 years, we have seen what unregulated markets or unregulated drugs can do to communities. We saw that with alcohol. We saw an increase in drug deaths related to alcohol consumption when there were unregulated stills, when we had a very short stint of abolition in Canada. We saw an increase in crime around accessing drugs, some of which were violent in nature, maybe connected to gangs, those sorts of things. When our pastimes become illegal, then the activity, then the people who are engaging in those things also become illegal. So I think that's really important. We see issues with society when it comes to alcohol, but we do not see the same level of harm that we saw when it was unregulated. People can go to the store and access alcohol so long as they meet age requirements, for example. So we think that's really important. Yeah.
They have their supervised consumption sites.
They have their supervised consumption sites. Yeah, and I think even more recently, we saw that with marijuana. I am of the age where I was able to see, as a young person, what it was like before people were able to access marijuana legally through regulated means in Canada. And there were people whose lives were entirely destroyed because they went to jail for possession charges. And now people can literally access marijuana at dispensaries I think there's over 20 in Barrie, and our society has not ended, right? There may be some concerns around accessing marijuana, and that means we need to create safeguards and we need to create regulations in some cases, but it doesn't mean that drugs are inherently bad. And I think that that's the same for the majority of drugs that we see on the streets. Opioids are used to address pain. They're about pain management. And it's just whether or not we're recognizing people's pain is legitimate or not, right? Some people are deemed that their pain is acceptable. They can go into hospital and they can get a prescription for that. There are some people that if they go into a hospital, because they're in pain, trying to access medication, they are labeled as drug seekers and they are turned away. But the drug ultimately is the same. The means of addressing pain is the same. And that's the same with stimulants, meth and Adderall, for example, accessing it on the street versus accessing it in a prescription. So I think it's really important that if we're looking at what lawlessness means, we need to actually look at what happens when we create a system where people who engage in a thing are automatically deemed problematic.
We have a lovely video of you up on our YouTube Shorts explaining, some of the harms with these sweeps that have been happening. But if you do have any comments you'd like to make,
I don't think I really have anything else to add, other than I think really mainly to emphasize what Christine said, which is that nobody wants to be sleeping in a tent. Nobody wants to see people sleeping in a tent, but they're not sleeping. They're sleeping in a tent because that's their best option, and people should be trusted that if they're in a tent, it's because this is the safest option for them.
Yeah, and so, to go back to the declaration of the state of emergency, one of the things that the mayor said was he was putting together some sort of task force that he was going to be using to help deal with this crisis that we're having in the city of Barrie. I wanted to ask any of you on the panel, since you guys have, lived experience and, various ways you've worked with the unhoused community, who would you like to see on this task force? Because when we were at the declaration of state of emergency, it seemed to just be the mayor and his city councilors that were with him. So if there is anyone you would like to see put on a task force to help deal with this crisis, who would that be?
I think I would just say you need to have people with lived experience, and I think it needs to have people who actually are living in the encampments that the mayor is targeting. Like, he says how he's doing this because he wants to help people. Well, you need to go to those people and ask them what can be done to give them that help. So I think first and foremost them, and then I don't know, not few politicians. I don't want to see politicians on this task force. People in the community, people for providing these services, people who have gone through it. I think people like Sarah who know a lot about this stuff and can really find good solutions and try to bring people together and find a solution.
Yeah, anyone else?
I definitely think it has to be people with lived and living experience. So people that are actually living it. It can't be someone that had lived experience that's been homeless 10, 15 years ago. It needs to be encampment residents, like people that are living in the reality of the housing crisis right now in the city of Barrie. Absolutely need to be on this task force. And the frontline workers that are working on the front lines every day need to be on the task force.
I agree with that too. I think it's important for people, especially people that have lived in the encampments and have gotten out, if they're lucky enough to, and they've gotten out. If we're there, with them, they can see that anybody is worthy of living a better life, right? If they have what they need to get to that. Like I said, I have family, thank God, but for people that don't, they need to see that, say, if I was there, I could go and tell them, I'm gonna literally hold your hand. I'm gonna be with you every step of the way. I'm gonna show you what you can do and where to go. As far as having politicians, no, I don't think so either. I think people that have education and lived experience together would be great. I think that would be a great force.
Yeah, anyone else?
Trauma-informed therapists.
Yes, yeah.
Would be a good one. And the biggest one is what everyone else has already said, people that have, been in their shoes before and have made it through and can speak to that. No one can speak to that more except for somebody who's experienced that.
Especially when you've lived with some of them and then you come out and they're like, oh my God, and they see it. You're like, okay, we were right down there together.
Yeah,
now we can be up here together.
Exactly. And it's inspiring. You need people that are going to inspire people. Sure. You need people that actually care. Yep. You need people that actually want to be solving this crisis and not putting a Band-Aid on it. Mm-hmm. You need people that are not just waiting for the opportunity to put some title on themselves to walk around with said title and shove it down people's throats. You need people that are actually going to show up and be like, all right, human beings need to be taken care of. We are all human beings, the necessities of life, everyone deserves that. You need people that understand that and truly want to solve this crisis.
You've been elected to the by Christine.
Apparently, yes.
Yeah, second that.
Thanks. I think that yes, there need to be people with lived experience, active and who are actively living, and people who I think have gotten through parts of it. I think though one of the things I work a lot with groups to try and promote that voice of lived experience in different ways. There needs to be a commitment to really honor the knowledge that people bring forward in order to do that, in order for it to be meaningful. I think that people need to get on the same page, that everybody who's part of that task force has something that they can offer. And unfortunately, I'm sure there's going to be politicians And I think recognizing that politicians have power in larger systems that maybe don't, like, I think really taking stock of who's there and how they can benefit and how they can help with this, because I think it's going to need to be a larger community thing. And also just in terms of people who are bringing their lived knowledge and their lived expertise to the table, that's what they're offering. One needs to be compensated, because almost everybody else in the room is probably going to be compensated, whether that's food, whether that's transportation, whether that's actual money. But not just that, there needs to be enough people who are living, enough people who have experience in the room, so that it doesn't feel like one person is responsible for speaking to the needs of an entire community, because every one of us here has different perspectives. And that's the same of any group of people. So it can't just be one voice at the table. I think that's really important. There was one thing that I was thinking of when I was listening in BC, actually, after the Robert Pickton murders and the trial and all of that came out. They were talking about safety, and there were real concerns that people who were experiencing homelessness had, and there were real concerns that people who were housed were experiencing as well. And one of the initiatives that they created, it was out of a sex work organization, advocacy group, was creating a table where people who had an invested interest in seeing a safer community, maybe different definitions of what that looked like, to sit together with the understanding that they were there to listen to each other first and foremost, see each other as human beings, but recognizing that they had differences. And what that did, by having multiple people from multiple different lived experiences at the same table, allowed people to see each other as real humans, as real community members. So I think right now, just having lived experience with mental health issues, if somebody's experiencing a crisis and you don't know what that looks like, it can feel scary. It can feel loud, it can feel overwhelming. But if you have an understanding that the person in front of you is a human being, and you have opportunities to have conversations about, no, that yelling has nothing to do with anyone else, that is me in myself, that is trying to regulate, that may feel uncomfortable, but these are the things that can help in those moments that aren't throwing someone in jail. That can really help to broaden an understanding for everybody, so that people who are feeling uncomfortable, and I think it's important to recognize people are feeling uncomfortable, actually recognize people as human beings and not something to remove so that they can feel comfortable again. And I think that building community means that we actually have to see each other as human beings. And to do that, we're going to have to get uncomfortable with the folks that we may see as causing some of these problems.
I just want to build on what Sarah said about the table, like who should be sitting on the task force, and the people with lived experience, like making sure that their voice is heard and they're not just there as like a token to say check a box, because I've been that token at tables, and I've left the tables because it really is an awful feeling to be there and know that your voice is not really being listened to. And you're reliving your deepest traumas just to have, just so they can say that, oh, she was at the table, but what you say holds absolutely no weight. So I think it's really important that everybody at the table, they have equal input, and having more than one person with lived experience at that table creates a sense of safety for those that are at the table to be able to talk freely and openly and share their experience, and people that are actively living it and people that have, been there and are a bit removed and have successfully transitioned out of that, is really important to have them both at the table together.
Yeah.
I don't think I have anything to add. I agree with what
Yeah, perfect. We've run out of time. Of course, we'll continue to talk about this topic, but if there's any last words, any quick summaries of anything based off the state of emergency that...
I'll be real quick.
Yeah.
One of the things that I don't think we've touched on too much is the involuntary treatment part. One, as someone who's experienced mental health crises, I can say that I have tried to access, not very recently, but the first time I think I was 16 years old, and I was not in active suicide. I did not have a plan, but I was definitely in a crisis, and I was turned away from mental health supports through emergency crisis because I did not have a plan. I did not meet that criteria. So I think that one, we need to actually look at what services are available and make sure that we're meeting people upstream so that they don't have to get to the point where it's very, very difficult to come back, and that when they're looking for those supports, they can access them in a timely fashion. The other thing that I really, really want to hit home is that involuntary treatment has not been demonstrated to work consistently. Most such studies, recent studies especially, show that there's no significant improvement in reducing substance use or criminal reoffenses when it comes to forced treatment, whether they be behavioral or whether they be chemical, so like forced onto opioid agonist treatment, something like that, and that there's actually really negative impacts of that, including increased fear, so people are less likely to reach out for supports or reach out to services because they're afraid that they will be involuntarily committed, for example. There's also a lot of trauma that has been, and a lot of violence that has been shown in mental health facilities. For example, there was a comment that in the 1990s, the hospitals that could support people were shut down. And I think that's a really troubling statement because the Huronia Regional Center in Orillia, which was a mental health hospital for many, many years, there was a huge unveiling of undocumented graves of people who had tried to access or who were involuntarily committed to those services. So there is a real history of extreme violence that has been imparted onto people with mental health concerns through those kinds of institutionalizations, and they have not been demonstrated to work anyway. So I really, really, really just want to make that really, really clear.
Yeah. Just to kind of build off that, when we're thinking about this, crisis and how are we going to solve this? How are we going to do anything? Like, the biggest thing, in my opinion, is we need to be thinking about how are we meeting people where they're at? We need to be meeting people where they're at, guiding and walking beside them as they make the steps to continue to support and guide along the way. Forced treatment doesn't work. You can't force somebody to choose to want to live, and you can't force somebody to choose to want to love themselves. It doesn't work like that. It's just that simple. Meeting people where they're at is about seeing each person for the human that they are and understanding that they have their own story. It's about loving people to help them love themselves and or to remind them that the world isn't all cruel, and to help them remember to not give up. That's what we need to be thinking about when we're thinking about how do we help people? How do we actually solve some of these issues and actually go about tackling this crisis and actually helping people get through it? You need to meet them where they're at and support them along the way.
I think everybody is in agreement on that. Yeah. So thank everybody for watching. Of course, on Simcoe Community Media's YouTube, we have a variety of videos already done on the encampments and the housing crisis here in Barrie. So we encourage you to go check them out. You might see some familiar faces on this panel talking, and thank you for watching. We want to thank our panelists for attending today and sharing their experiences and giving us some solutions on how we can deal with this crisis. As you may have noticed, I am wearing an Every Child Matters t-shirt, and if you watched our Every Child Matters flag raising video, you'll know that the Barrie Mayor had declared September Truth and Reconciliation Month. Now for Truth and Reconciliation Month, you can wear an orange Every Child Matters t-shirt any day, but if you're looking for something to wear on September 30th for Truth and Reconciliation events that might be happening in the city, we encourage you to look for organizations who are giving money back to the community. Of course, my shirt is from Chippewas of Grandma First Nation, and I know that they are putting every penny back into the community with the selling of these t-shirts. Merci for watching, and we'll see you down the river.